So I'm at race management, then I'm looking at the event for March 7th. Remember from yesterday, we used the Sport Compact class here, and we imported all the results already. So my entire race is done with qualifying and the feature. And so the next step here is points and pay. Points and pay utilizes a scheme that you can build, your point structure and your pay structures, to be able to, in an automated way, in a one-click way on race night, be able to enter your points and your pay super efficiently, and then do whatever you need to do with the payouts from there. So before we get into actually adding a points and pay group, I'm going to go up to settings, and there's a settings option for points and pay schemes. So I'll use that. As you can see, there are a ton of point schemes that we've built here. There's a ton of pay schemes that we built here. Lineup points only comes into play if you're using passing points from your heat races to line up your features. So we're going to disregard that for the time being. And right now we're going to look at, like I said, championship points, so your main point structure, and for payouts, your payout schemes as well. I will tell you, for NASCAR sanctioned points, you don't have to do anything on your end. As long as the lineups exist and the results exist, the sanctioned points, the national points for NASCAR stuff, will calculate in their sanction management screen automatically. You don't have to calculate NASCAR points at all. It'll be done by them. Actually, it won't even be done by them. It'll be done by the program in an automated way, so that when your event is done, the sanctioned points are updated basically within a half hour, because our server has a caching time, which obviously makes the sanction points calculations for NASCAR folks super easy. So all you'll worry about is your actual track championship points and pay schemes. So when I go into add a scheme, pretty simple stuff. There are global schemes that exist already for, if you run IMCA classes or WSOTA classes, or we got ASCS stuff in here. So there's a couple of them that exist already. There is one that we built in here for the NASCAR rules with the winner bonus for the A feature. So if you want to use NASCAR's point scheme, you can, but you can also create your own for your own track points. There's no rule that makes you do that. So I'll add a scheme. I'll choose championship. You name it. So I'll just name it whatever random thing I want. You can name it whatever you want to. Don't check the box for drag racing unless you're a drag strip, which none of you are. So don't check the box, and we'll add. And this is what it looks like. So the first thing you can set here is you can set your show-up points. If you want competitors to earn a minimum number of points just for showing up, you can enter that here. There's also a non-start points. So a competitor shows up but is a DNS in every race. You can have it add more or less or whatever you want to their total if they came to the racetrack but never actually raced. And then a minimum starting races if you have them start a minimum number of shows to be able to be eligible for points. But I'll start by adding a breakdown, and a breakdown is just a race type. So I had a qualifying race, so I'll add qualifying points. There is a toggle to where if a driver competed in a race, they will no longer receive show-up points. You can check that box if you'd like. And then passing points really don't come into play here for qualifying. We'll talk about that when we get to the feature. So I'm going to give everybody 10 show-up points just for showing up. And now we get to our qualifying breakdown. Again, same checkbox. Competitors in this race will not receive show-up points. If you want to have any kind of passing points, you can. Doesn't really come into play very often. And then result modifiers. If they DNF, if they DQ, if they DNS, or if they black flag, you can set custom point totals if any of those things come into play. So most commonly, if somebody DQs, it gives them no points. For a DNF, black flag, you can do different things. And then a class minimum. If you have a minimum number of cars in a class to be able to receive full points, you can set your class minimums that way. Deduction based on the number of cars, whatever else. But the bulk of this is position points. The bulk of this is how many points on a per position basis. So we have a tool that'll allow you to add a lot of positions at once. So for qualifying, I'll add 10 positions. My points will start at 15, and they will decrease by 1, and I'll add all of those, and now I have positions 1 through 10, starting at 15, decreasing by 1 for every position, and I just have to save. You can also customize these boxes if it drops off by half a point or if it drops off by 2 points or whatever. Customize that however you want to. But that's basically all you really need to do to start creating your point scheme. So I'll add another breakdown. It'll be for my A feature, for my main event. And go. And here, I'll do the same stuff. I'll just, I'll add 10 positions. My points will now start at 100. I'll decrease by 5. And there we go. 100, 95, 90, 85, blah, blah, blah. And I can edit this as necessary. So I'll save there. So that's really the process of creating schemes. I've got qualifying and I've got A feature. Now, I'll show you this in qualifying now. It's appeared now that I have an A feature. There's another option called exclude transfers. This really comes into play if you're running a B main more often than not, but you can, when you have transfers from one race type to another, exclude the transfers. So if I wanted to award points for everyone in a B main who finished 1 through 4 that transferred to the A, and then everyone else received points, I would hit exclude transfers to the A main. It would not award points 1 through 4, and then the first car eligible to receive points would receive the 15, so on and so forth. So for B mains, that becomes helpful to exclude the transfers. Those are point schemes. Pretty straightforward there. Again, if you do have any questions about that, you can throw them in the chat, and Dakota is here to help answer them. Otherwise, there's a pay schemes option, and you'll see that this is and I'll just edit one that already exists. This is exactly the same. Exactly the same here. So I'll take my sport compact scheme and I'll edit it. And now instead of working with points, you're working with dollars. But start pay, non-start pay, position pay, it all is exactly the same. Exactly the same. So I'll add a qualifying breakdown here. And I'll give my fast qualifier a $100 bonus. So my fast qualifier gets 100, not 1,000, 100. Everybody else gets nothing. There we go. So you can add, it's all exactly the same as points. That's basically the schemes. There's not much more to them. So I'll get out of schemes. And what did I use here? I use Sport Compact for pay. I use Webinar Test for points, I believe. That's what I did. Webinar Test scheme. Perfect. So now when I come back to race night, okay, my races are done. I've done my entries, done my lineups, done my results. All that stuff is done. Final checkered flag is over. Now I'm ready for points and pay. So the process here for points and pay, if I add a points and pay group, you name it. I always name my points groups point group 1. I don't have any reason for doing that. It's just organized for me. It really doesn't matter what you name it. But then you're just going to select the point scheme that you've created that you want to use. Select the pay scheme that you want to use that you've created. Then there's a couple of other options. First is schedules. The first day when we were talking about season management, we talked about having multiple schedules. This is where you can select which schedule you want the points to apply to, 1 or more. If you're doing owner or team points, you can select if the points apply to competitors, owner, or teams. That's up to you. You can do that if you'd like. And then there's a points eligibility option. When we were talking about race management, we talked about the option to have a license check. This is one area where that comes into play. So if I choose points eligibility, either you can manually select who's eligible by using the check boxes. You can have only folks who have purchased a license or temporary license be eligible. So your registrants, none of mine are in that case. Or you can say, nobody is eligible. They don't need a license. Or everybody's eligible. They don't need a license. So those license checks become valuable. If you select this middle option, it'll only award points to the folks who registered with you or you allowed in the entry screen to run with a temporary license. Same thing with payout. Same exists here if you have points or pay eligibility based off of that. Otherwise, you can just manually select or deselect what you want to happen. But I'll add, and you'll be able to see now my points and pay are calculated. I've got my points. I've got my payouts. All well and good. It's there. I think I DQ'd someone. And for that reason, let's go back and look. Vince Ballwood. I did. I DQ'd Vince. And so for that reason, Vince did not receive feature points, received his qualifying points, if I remember correctly, received his qualifying points because of the way I had it set, and then he had his 10 show-up points. So he ended up at a total of 18, but he got DQ'd in the A main, so he didn't get A main points. But your points and pay are basically done just because you've got this correct. Your scheme's correct. The other things you can do here, you can add adjustments. So if you do need to manually change something, like he's going to get docked 30 points for rough driving, you can take away 30. He's going to get a $50 bonus for being the hard charger. You can put in 50. Those types of things. So you can still manually make adjustments as needed. But if your scheme is correct, the foundation of what you need to do for points and payouts should be correct here. If you need to change anything, hit recalculate, and then you can go through and you can clear your points or pay adjustments, add in your new schemes, all that kind of stuff. If you need to change anything, you can do that way. Basically start from scratch. You can add more than one points or pay group, which really is a rarely used feature. It really shouldn't come into play very often, but it is possible to have multiple points groups in one event. And you can also copy one from a previous event if you'd like. Again, you can edit what schedule it applies to up here. You can edit if it applies to owners or teams or just the competitors, all that kind of stuff. But at that point, your points should be done. Nice thing about doing your points this way is, again, NASCAR sanctioned points are updated within the half hour. In the app and on your public profile at myracepass.com, your point standings pages are updated basically within the half hour. And if you do a website through us, your website, where your point standings page on the website is, again, updated automatically within the half hour. So it's all automated just because you're using race management. The website stuff, that exists as well for your schedule or results tabs. It's all automated because you're using race management. So now that I've got my points and pay calculated, I can press this Create Payments button at the bottom of the screen, and that brings us to the Season Management Payments tab. Going day one, this is the tab that I said we'd come back to, is Season Management and Payments. Couple of things that you can do on this screen. First off, you can obviously review all of the payments that are coming from race management. So when you create those payments, pushes the payments to race management, you can see what they're owed. If you need to make some kind of manual adjustment to that, you have that option. But again, as long as your scheme was correct, you applied payments correctly in race management, this should be correct. You can also change the payment type, and you can change the default payment type also. So if I choose default, direct deposit, cash, whatever you want to do that way, I'll change it all to cash and I'll save. And now everyone's changed to cash by default. Or you can change it for one driver at a time if you'd like to do that as well. Screen will also show you if they have the address on file for that driver. That you get the address on file by having them fill out a registration. Registration is where you can gather that information. But that's basically all we need there. At this point, we can create checks from this screen. So I'll click Create Checks and kind of show you these options. And I can't do that because I changed everyone's payment type to cash. So let's try that again. Change it to check. Now we'll create checks. Gives you the option to print checks for everybody. Vince is not checked here because he made $0 because he was DQ'd, remember. So it'll only print the checks for guys who made money. There's a couple of check layouts that you can choose. It's really difficult to get much of anything else from your bank. So if you're using anything, or if you need to use anything that's not here, you'll have to let us know and we can try to customize that. There's a wallet check option. There's a laser lined option. There's just a couple of options here. Really don't need much else. Put in the starting check number. Check the box. You can change the printing order if you want, from running order to last name to car number, whatever's easier for you. I'll just print them in the order of car number, and then I can create. Brings me to basically what amounts to a preview screen. This is what will show up on the checks. You can see if the check is made out to an owner. If we're paying the owner's name appears on the payee line. I got to find one. If it's a driver's name appears on the payee line. And then there's a stub at the bottom as well for your records or whatever else if you've got the perforated checks. But then I can print. Brings up the print preview. And now I'm ready to print my checks. I'm not going to actually print them because I've got the wrong printer selected here. This will make more sense now. Ready to print my checks. So you can print checks from this screen. Go back. Now that checks are printed, you can see all the checks here at the bottom of the screen, the check number, all that kind of stuff. If you create checks again, it'll actually just continue on with a second group of printed checks. So if you have to print checks again, you can mark these as voided if you need to. Second thing you can do from this screen is there's a print option here for a report. This report is what I use at the back gate for drivers signing for their payouts, whether I'm paying in check or cash or whatever. It'll show you the payee's name. If the payee is a car owner, it's got the driver's name in parentheses, how much they were owed, and if you printed via check, what the check number was. There's also one down here that if there's no check number, it just has how much they were paid. And then I use the white space in between for drivers or owners signing for their check. So if they're collecting, if you got a back gate payout window at the end of the night, you can start to monitor and track who's claimed their pay and who hasn't. Just helps things be a little bit more organized at the back gate. You can also export this list into Excel if you want and print it off, which is what I typically do. There's also another print option for mailing labels. So it tracks the obviously address on file stuff. And then you can print mailing labels. This becomes obviously fruitful for you. There's a lot of tracks that if they mail out their pay during the week, I got a number of tracks to do that on Wednesday. They'll mail everybody their check from the previous race night. You can stuff the envelope, print the mailing label here, and put it on the envelope to mail them. You can do it that way as well. If you track your financials in QuickBooks, there's a QuickBooks export option. So in QuickBooks, you'll create obviously bank account, you'll create expense account, and then or you can enter a new one here. But you can basically check from that list. Whatever you put here has to exactly match what is in QuickBooks. Press download. It creates a .iif file that can only be uploaded in QuickBooks. And I believe it's only the desktop version of QuickBooks. So you have to have QuickBooks Desktop to do that. If you track your financials there, you can export all of your first payout information to QuickBooks that way. And then there's just the button for race management. I always like to say at that point, you can shut the lights off and go home. Obviously, I wish it was that easy, but that's basically printing all of the payments on race night. So now that race night's over, we come to the end of the year. You have to start to gather all of this information come tax time. We have a reports tab here that will bring you to all of our reports. And we have one report specifically that I'm going to point out now. It's called our 1099 report. So for all of the payouts that you create, which by the way, in race management, create payments right here is what pushes that data into the 1099 report. But I'll show you the 1099 report here. It will track a list of all of our payees, if their address is on file, and how much they made throughout the course of the year. So there's a couple of things on the screen I'll show you. One, there's a red error up here because I've got 4 payment groups. So I've created payments or calculated my points and pay in race management, but I did not press create payments at the bottom of the screen. Didn't hit create payments down here. So for those 4, I can create payments from here to fix that, basically. Or if you don't want to track those payments those nights, you can do that as well. But as I come at the top of the screen, there is a filter. You can either filter it to all payees or payees that only made more than $600 because obviously that's the tax threshold cutoff. Filter by year. You can go back through the years that you've done this. You can export this information PDF or to an Excel sheet, and then you can print it as well if you need to. But yeah, as you go down through this list, there's a breakdown for everybody, and then there's a breakdown on a night-by-night basis for every payee. Again, if it's a car owner, the owner's name, how much they made every night. If it's a driver, how much that driver made every night, all those types of things. So you can start to track those payments. Typically, what I do is I'll export all of these payments to an Excel sheet. In that Excel sheet, I'll then apply the Social Security number or tax ID number for every payee. And then I use a program, if I can remember the name of it here. It's called W-2 Mate. In our Help Center article regarding the 1099 report, I give instructions for how to install and use W-2 Mate. But I use W-2 Mate because once I've applied those Social Security numbers in the Excel sheet, I can import the Excel sheet, and it creates the template for my 1099s. So I can just go get the 1099 forms from an accounting office and print those 1099s from W-2 Mate, and I have all my 1099s printed. The other thing you can do in W-2 Mate is you can export all of the 1099 data as a PDF and email those PDFs to your tax office, and that way they can print the 1099 report if you do it that way. There's also a 1096 report that you have to file that you can print from there, and all that kind of stuff as well. But that's how I handle W-2s. Is I use this 1099 report, or 1099s, excuse me, not W-2s, 1099 report. It's 1099s. I use this report, I export it as Excel, apply the socials, and send it to my tax office, and it makes life a lot easier for me that way. That's kind of how I handle that. We'll take a look at some of the other reports. There's a lot of reports. Some of them show in race management under the reports tab, like my lineups and my results and my entry lists and things of that nature. Some of them only exist here. In terms of entry reports, again, I can do the transponder list on a night-by-night basis. I can do my entry lists. I can, if you have their addresses on file, you can monitor that. All of those types of things. So that can become valuable there. As far as my lineup reports, the same three reports that show up in race management, as well as there's a Westhold one as well for specific to that. If you want to use that to import, it's very difficult to do it that way, but we do have it available. Many results reports, and again, play with these as you need, from individual events to qualifying results on a night-by-night to yearly results to a hard charger, yearly hard charger. Actually, I really like this one. I'll show it to you. I use this a lot. It'll actually show you for how many events they've run, how many they gained, how many they lost, what they basically net gain and net loss for the whole year. So I have I know a lot of banquets do this, and our banquet for a late model series that I work for will have an award for the driver who passed the most cars in a season for our 8 features. So, I would be able to come to this report and say, Pepe passed 18 cars this year. He's my yearly hard charger, that kind of thing. A lot of points reports. Current points and pay for your full season by date. Point average for 1, 2 to 3 races. There's just so many of them. So scroll through those and figure out what would best apply for you. There is an expected yearly payout report, and this would show similar to the 1099 report, but it would include all payments, and it would not ignore the payments that you didn't press create payments for. So it's very similar there. And then there's a couple of competitor reports as well to show, the DQs and to show your license reports. If you've got, folks who used a temporary license or competed without a license or those types of things. So you can start to see those reports for the full season. All those other types of things. So a lot of reports here, and they are all valuable in their own way. You'll have to kind of experiment with those to see what's most helpful for you. One thing I do want to, I'll put this link in the chat. One thing I do want to bring up, going back to the 1099 report at mrphelp.com, I have a Help Center article for 1099s. So I will search 1099. And I've created a video here. It's on our YouTube page as well. If you're going to utilize My Race Pass to do your 1099 information, if you're going to utilize My Race Pass to calculate your payments, you watch this video. And I'll put the link in the chat. This I went through the entire process of using W-2 Mate from start to finish. from both exporting out of my race pass to importing into W2 Mate to printing the 1099s, all that stuff. So that can be helpful as well. But that's really all I have for today. I knew it would be a little bit shorter session, but man, getting those points right is so important for your racetrack. And if you're going to do payouts, getting the payout stuff right, so important for the racetrack also. Again, I can go back to season management. I can go to the points tab and I can, see that I created points for that date, whatever date it was. Maybe it wasn't on this schedule. I did it on this schedule, I'm sure. No, I didn't. I did it on one of the schedules. Maybe it was on Dakota's. But you'll be able to see that all of the points are there. You can click on the name of a driver to verify all that stuff. There it is. Perfect. That one. You can verify for each driver by clicking on their name, how they earned the points, all those types of things, and all of that kind of stuff.